A disastrous night for the Rossoneri that season. Back-to-back seasons, Milan players get lectured by the Curva Sud. A whole host of question marks around the coach, who finally comes out in a post-match press conference and says, "We'll wait till the end of the season, and then the club and I will sit down and figure out my future." In a must-win match, a match where Milan needed to score goals, 0 shots on target from Milan's attackers in Olivier Giroud, Rafael Leao, and Christian Pulisic, and a bizarre starting 11 by Stefano Pioli that left most Milan fans perplexed about what exactly was Milan trying to achieve today. No takeaways from today's match, guys. It was a horrific performance by the entire team. There's only one topic to discuss at this point in time, and that's Stefano Pioli. And I think this tweet right here might be the perfect starting point for us. So as Mina mentions, Pioli not good enough for Milan according to too many of their fans. And she goes on to mention that he won the title 2 years ago against all odds, took Milan to the Champions League semifinals last season, and in spite of the inclusion of 10 new players this season, the coach has still managed to pull off what at this point in time looks like a second place finish in Serie A. And the reason why I'm discussing this particular tweet, it's got nothing to do against Mina. It's just a sentiment that we've heard, and quite honestly, I've also said a lot of the times, because Stefano Pioli's resume at Milan has been fairly decent. Nothing what we expected it to be when he was signed on as a coach. So in order to discuss this whole thing as a complete topic, we will be forced to go back into the 2021-2022 season. And that season, quite simply, especially in the league, virtually perfect. Milan won the Serie A title, won their 19th title. Didn't expect the coach to be able to pull that off. He deserves all the credit and praise for that. And his name at the end of the day is etched into the history of Milan as the coach who led this team to their 19th title. But at this point in time, guys, we're almost 2 years away from that accomplishment. So this is a question to you all. How much credit in the bank do you get for winning a title? Can you go on with 2 seasons where the team hasn't accomplished as much as you would expect it to accomplish? Do you get 3 free years before your future is questioned? You guys let me know in the comment section, but to me, this topic is a little bit more loaded, which brings me to the second part of this tweet. Took them to the Champions League semifinals. And this is where I think Stefano Pioli's time after Milan won the Serie A title becomes a little bit more complicated, because it's not quite as simple as Milan just making the Champions League semifinal. You have to, at the end of the day, look at the path that Milan took to actually get to that place. And keep in mind, this is not a criticism of the coach. He can only try to beat the teams that are in front of him, but you still have to look at it from a rational perspective and actually break down the quality of the teams that he faced. If we look at the group stage that Milan played in, they were put in the same group as Chelsea, Red Bull Salzburg, and Dinamo Zagreb. Now let's be real, at the end of the day, you expect Milan to get out of this group. With the right quality, you expect them to get out of the group ahead of Chelsea. But at the end of the group stage, that did not happen. They played against Salzburg and they picked up the wins. They played against Dinamo Zagreb and they picked up the wins. But the 2 times that they had to face a tougher opponent in Chelsea, Milan lost with an aggregate scoreline of 5-0. And that too against a Chelsea side that had a new coach in Graham Potter who barely even survived his time with the club. So yes, you managed to beat Dinamo Zagreb, you can beat Red Bull Salzburg, but when you're actually tested against a quality opponent, you blank against them 5-0. Now let's look at the round of 16. The first round that Milan played was against the Spurs. The Spurs team from last season, guys, was an absolute disaster. Their striker's future was in doubt. Their coach, Antonio Conte, was having open fights in the media against the players, the management, the entire structure of the Spurs, calling out the absence of trophies in the history of the club that he himself was coaching. That Spurs side finished 8th place in the Premier League, and Milan beat them 1-0 in the round of 16, just barely scraping past that side. And then came the quarterfinals of the Champions League, where Milan faced Napoli. Now, this Napoli side that Milan managed to beat was a team that was seeing itself be on the verge of winning a Serie A title for the first time in 30 plus years. There's no doubt about the fact that this team was distracted by being able to pull off something historic that they hadn't in multiple decades. Now, as I already mentioned, that's not Pioli's fault. That's not the team's fault. That's not the players' fault. That's the opponent that they got. But we have to realistically look at the path that this coach had to take to make the Champions League semifinals. It's very easy to write and say he won you a title and he made the Champions League semifinal, but who did he actually beat in the process? Because it sounds like every single time that he was tested when he played against Chelsea, he failed, because the next time where Stefano Pioli was truly tested in the Champions League was against Inter in the semifinal. And just like he picked up that 5-0 aggregate against Chelsea in the semifinal, Milan blanked out against its arch rivals in Inter 3-0. So at the end of the day, yes, you made the Champions League semi-final, good for you, but that doesn't quite paint the full picture. If Milan was tested earlier in the knockout stage by one of the top teams like Liverpool or Real Madrid or Borussia Dortmund, Chelsea, Manchester City, PSG, Bayern Munich, I have serious doubts that this team could have pulled off a semi-final run. Because you look at the season, the Serie A season, in the same season that Milan played, being the defending champions, that was one of the worst title defensive we've seen from a team in the recent past. At the end of the day, guys, Stefano Pioli's AC Milan last season didn't even really manage to pull off Champions League football. They finished in 5th place. It was just a points deduction that was given to Juventus that pushed them out and allowed Milan to climb into the top 4. So there again, that good fortune was involved not just in the Champions League, but also in Serie A. You had a somewhat easier path into the semifinals of the Champions League, and in the other tournament, you finished in 5th place, but got very, very lucky. The 2022 Serie A title, a perfect season for Stefano Pioli, but last season wasn't quite as much. So at the end of the day, if on last season the only tag we put is Champions League semifinalists, I don't think we're doing justice to what the fans are actually complaining about. Because to me, when I listen to what the fans are complaining about, I don't think they're discounting the fact that Milan didn't win a Serie A title under this coach. They're also not discounting the Champions League run that they had last season. What they're complaining about, and what I also truly believe about this coach, is that he cannot take Milan to the next level. As the tweet said, in spite of signing 10 new players, Milan still will likely finish in 2nd place this season. Yeah, I think that's where they'll probably finish for as long as Stefano Pioli is the coach of this team. They'll finish in 2nd place in Serie A here and there. They'll get out of the group stage maybe in the Champions League and make a deep run. Maybe they'll make somewhat of a run in the Europa League as well. But they're not going to win things. And this club's foundation, this club's trophy room is built on winning things, not picking up small wins like, hey, Champions League semifinalists, 2nd place this year. Stefano Pioli and a 2nd place finish for Milan was acceptable 3 years ago when this team had just pulled its way out of the banter era where they weren't even making Champions League football for 7 straight years. But now, with the quality of players this team has, with the fact that vast majority of Milan's starters are starters for their international teams too, including Netherlands, including Portugal, including France. It's just not good enough to see the performances that Milan has put in the recent past, this season specifically, against the bigger sides in the more important matches. Which brings me to this season. If we look at the Serie A table, there's a 14-point difference between 1st place Inter and 2nd place Milan. No Milan fan will accept a 2nd place spot from their team while Inter are sitting in 1st. And even that 2nd spot, you have to have a bit of a dispute about that. Look at what has happened to the other top teams. Napoli, who won the title last season. This time around, they have had one of the most dramatic falls from grace. They've had, 3 different coaches coach this side this season? Imagine if Spalletti was there. And imagine if he made them play the way that they played last season. Do we think Milan would be sitting in 2nd place? And look at this Juventus side. It's a lot of thanks to Max Allegri and the failures of what this team has been. There's reports of wholesale changes coming at Juventus, including the coach and majority of the team. And then there's Roma. Look at the way that they were playing at the beginning of the season under Mourinho, and look at how they're playing under Daniele De Rossi. Imagine he was the coach who started the season, and look at the way that Milan has played against his side twice now. Can we definitively say that Milan would be a better side in comparison to Roma throughout the entirety of this campaign? So yes, you can once again say Milan is sitting in 2nd place, but they're sitting in 2nd place to who? A Napoli side that has fallen from grace, a Juventus side that has never been able to figure it out this season, and a Roma side that who quite clearly had the wrong coach for the first 20 plus matches. So yes, Milan is sitting in 2nd. But would they still be 2nd if all these teams had the right seasons from the beginning? What happens when Juventus are firing at their best? What happens when Napoli are firing at their best? What happens when you have to play Bayern Munich in the Champions League? What happens when you eventually have to take on an Inter side or Liverpool or Real Madrid? Can this coach in Stefano Pioli get this Milan team to cross the line against those sides? Because almost everything that we've seen against the bigger oppositions this season and the seasons in the past, he has consistently failed. They're just some one-off wins against PSG or against Napoli in the Champions League last season. The more consistent theme are performances like today. So the Milan fans are not forgetting what this coach has done. the true rational Milan fans remember what happened in 2022. We have just reached a place now where we realize that in order to take the next step, it has to be somebody different from Stefano Pioli. Somebody who's maybe had more experience on the highest level, has coached the top teams, the top players in the top competitions on a consistent basis, and is a proven winner. Because outside of winning the 2022 title, in his 5 years at Milan, it has to be said, when it comes to the overall competitions and lifting trophies, we've mostly been losers. And then it comes to the individual element of today's match. You look at that starting 11 and you're left completely confused as to why the coach today, for whatever reason, decided that Davide Calabria is going to play as an inverted midfielder and Yunus Musa is going to play more like a right back. The fact that Tiani Reinders, one of the better players that Milan has had creatively in the recent past, was left on the bench is shocking. The fact that Milan had a man advantage for over an hour of the match and only managed to pull off one goal scored by Matteo Gabbia. That is truly embarrassing, guys. Most of the times when Milan had possession, they had no idea what to do. No clue what to do. Leao would get on the ball and he'd just stand and look around, and everybody else would be looking at him like, okay, what do we do now? And that's not just specific to Leao. That's to Theo Hernandez. That's to Pulisic. That's to Jovic. Most of the times, Milan would just be staring at each other, wondering what movements they're supposed to be putting in. Whereas the kind of goal that Roma scored in the beginning of the match, the fact that it was Mancini, a center back again scoring for Roma in an attacking phase of the game, that tells you how completely out-coached Pioli was compared to Daniele De Rossi, who's been a coach for 3 freaking months. He completely out-coached Stefano Pioli by loading Milan's box with a center back as an attacker who actually ends up scoring another goal against them. They had a plan. They had some type of a vision, and then suddenly in the second half, Matteo Gabbia is that attacker that's playing up front for Milan. Suddenly, Stefano Pioli sees, oh, De Rossi just used Mancini as an attacker, as a center back. Okay, you know what, Matteo? You also try that. It's like there's no logic to some of the things that Milan, or most of the things that Milan was doing today. You can tell that at this point in time, they just need a new tactician. They need a new coach to come in, take the qualities of these players and start playing in a complete different way. Because the way that Milan has been playing this season, the way that they played last season, this tweet from Mina that said he won the title 2 years ago, this will just turn into 3 years, and then 4 years, and then 5 and on. Because the thing that Milan fans at this point in time are complaining about is not discounting the past accomplishments of Stefano Pioli, but just a realization that if this team wants to take the next step, if this team wants to not just make semi-final runs of the Champions, but actually win it, they'll need to take this foundation created by Stefano Pioli and start building something new on it under a new coach. And as always for me, especially in a loss, Forza Milan. Grazie mille. Ciao tutti. Did you know Benito Mussolini put an end to the existence of Inter Milan? And the only reason why AC Milan is called what it is because of the fascist leader? What led to the breakup of AC Milan and Inter Milan in that restaurant behind the Duomo is fascinating in itself. But what is even more fascinating